There you go.
Thank you, Jeffrey. It's always such a treat to be in a meeting with you. Hi, everyone. I am an alcoholic. My name is Ashley. It is such a treat to be at the Higher Love meeting. I always have such a good time here, and thanks so much to the folks who provide music and entertainment by dancing. It does say in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous that we are not a glum lot, and that means we are not unhappy. So that logic follows to say that we are happy. I looked up glum because I've got out my unabridged dictionary. It was my mom's birthday on the 11th, and she always kept an unabridged dictionary in the hallway. So I checked out the definition of glum, and it means morose and sullen and everything that we can learn not to be as a result of working the 12 steps in Alcoholics Anonymous, enjoying the fellowship of the Spirit here. I have a sobriety date. It is the 30th of December, 2006. So I just joyfully celebrated a sobriety anniversary by the grace of my higher power, having a sponsor, a home group, digging into this wonderful big book here, and just doing the things that are suggested around AA. My home group is the Beacon Group. We meet virtually on Zoom Monday through Friday at 12 noon Eastern. Would love to come meet us. Someone will, or I will put in the chat the link for the Beacon Group. We have a wonderful solution-based format. We do a step every single day. We believe in the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous as a way to get to a spiritual awakening, or otherwise put, to wake up my spirit, to wake up my spirit. And a person speaks on the step of the day for about 30 minutes, really sharing their experience with it, how to work the step. And then we all have the opportunity in a small group to then share, because we also have something in AA. We did hear our beautiful 12 traditions. We have something called the 12 concepts of service. And the fourth concept emphasizes that participation is the key to harmony. I work closely with my sponsor, and the more time I spend with her, the more I realize that I get a lot out of spending time with her. It really benefits me to run things by her, just to stay close by her side. And together we've done some really exciting and maybe nerdy things in AA. I think that one of the times I was here at Higher Love, I showed pictures on my phone into the camera of us going to Bill Wilson, who's a co-founder of AA, and his wife Lois Wilson's home in upstate New York. It's called Stepping Stones. It's a National Historic Site now, as designated by the United States government. And it's it was like a pilgrimage. It was a holy experience to walk into their living room. Everything is exactly as they left it. Lois's Al-Anon book, One Day at a Time, and Al-Anon with her little needlepoint cover is sitting there on the chair where she did her meditation in the morning. So in addition to working the steps with my sponsor, I get to do things like that enhance my love and appreciation for Alcoholics Anonymous. Mm-hmm. And I also sponsor other people in AA, and that's really neat, And what I'm reminded is that in AA, the people, at least when I got here, are beyond human aid. And my role, if I'm asked, is only to help guide a person to the higher power of their own understanding, because the book says that we need a vital spiritual experience, and the book is designed to help people find a power greater than themselves. And I always say to folks I'm sponsoring, I will only suggest that you do something, 1, I'm presently doing, 2, that I have done in the past, or 3, I'm willing to do right now. And that if I talk about stuff that's not in our literature, you should be very suspicious of me, because those are the parameters of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we're not a professional society. It's not about giving advice. In our 8th tradition, we say Alcoholics Anonymous is forever non-professional. And those are outside issues according to the 10th tradition. And if we talk about those, I'm really clear about that boundary. If we talk about outside issues or something professional, if someone has profound trauma and needs professional support, for example. So I want to talk a little bit about the steps. I've been thinking about how to, just have a fresh experience tonight. And I thought of some other ways that I've experiences that I've had with the first 3 steps in particular, but just to even talk to the newcomers who may be here tonight, and welcome. I hope you'll keep coming back. There's nothing a drink will make better. And that is 100% my experience. And I'll share some of the pickles that I've been in when it seems like a drink would have been a really good idea, and a drink only would have made my disaster into a calamity. You know, whether it was an emotional disaster or a physical disaster or a financial challenge, there is nothing a drink will make better. So what are these 12 steps? And this is our book, The 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, which was published in, I think, 1953, when Bill was going through a very serious phase of depression. And when he was headed towards emotional sobriety. You know, we get our physical sobriety first. We get our abstinence from our substance first. We put down the drink. Then we start to, you know, I came from a drinking, stayed from a thinking. And what he writes in the foreword of the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions is that AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which, if practiced as a way of life, so not just on the alcoholism, but as a whole way of life, if I can weave these principles into my very being, into my way of thinking, into my family life, if I can import them into my workplace, into my, you know, whatever my hobbies, my spiritual practice, my community clubs, everything, these 12 steps can expel the obsession to drink and enable me to become happily and usefully whole. Happily and usefully whole. And that means a lot to me because I always had a hole in my soul. You know, I grew up with a lot of messages. We all got different messages growing up. And the one that I got is that I was a burden, that I was too much. And the belief I had about myself when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous is that I was too damaged to heal. I really believed that about myself, that I was too damaged to heal. I had a family legacy of alcoholism, the family disease, which we talk about in our chapter, The Family Afterward. And, you know, where there's that line where the alcoholic says to his wife, "Look, Ma, the wind stopped blowing about a tornado. Ain't life great?" You know, there were people in other generations of my family who were like, "Look, Ma, the wind stopped blowing. Ain't life grand?" Because alcoholism had been the tornado that just ripped my family apart for generations. And I, as a kid, got all that detritus. I got all that blowback. And so I, for example, just to give a little context, you know, my parents divorced when I was really young, and what their divorce looked like in my life was I went to 13 schools in 12 years, and none of those decisions were made for my benefit. You know, there was not participation as the key to harmony when I was growing up, concept 4. There was not common welfare and unity, tradition 1. There was not principles before personalities, tradition 12. And one of the times my dad came to get me here in rural Williamson County, Tennessee, where I'm zooming in from tonight, my mom hid me from him. Like, she had me lay on the floor below the windows, turned out all the lights, hid the car in the barn, acted like I wasn't home. My dad's running around the house, pounding on the doors and the windows, screaming expletives, cussing my mom out. You know, and then he just eventually drove away, and there was the visit that I was supposed to have with my dad. So that's just a small example of what my childhood looked like, a lot of emotional violence. And so the idea that the 12 steps could enable me to live usefully and happily whole was very attractive to me. And when I was introduced to these 12 steps on the 6th of, so I came into the program, I was introduced to the program before I stopped drinking, because I was introduced to Al-Anon before I came into AA. I was introduced to them on the 6th of February, the same year I stopped drinking. I was taught that in the first 3 steps 1, 2, and 3, I could make peace with the God of my understanding. And that AA gave me the freedom and the dignity to define that God however I needed and wanted to define it for myself. That I could keep the God I had already come in with, if that God worked for me, that I could experiment and find a new higher power, that I could convert to a different religious faith if I needed to do that, that I could write a want ad, like I would put in a want ad for the ideal job or the ideal partner, that I could co-create a relationship with a loving higher power of my own understanding, and that every other member of AA the world over was granted that same dignity, but that I would have peace in that relationship and that I would be cared for, because that's what it talks about in step 3. I would turn my will and my life over to the care of this loving higher power. And then I was told that in steps 4, 5, 6, and 7, if I took those steps as laid out in the book with a sponsor, I would make peace with myself. You know, that this war of self-criticism, self-doubt, self-blame, and shame, being on my own back, self-beat, as my recovery buddy Nikki called it, that I could have peace between my 2 ears. And then in steps 8 and 9, the relationship steps, I could make peace with others, even people who had harmed me, people I had harmed, people I didn't necessarily know. You know, that includes institutions, that includes, you know, major resentments, things that are unjust, that somehow and that doesn't mean that they stop being unjust, but that somehow or another my attitude changes in such a way that I can stand up for things and I can stand up for myself without standing against my fellows, that there can be peace. And that in steps 10, 11, and 12, I would grow in peace, that those are the growth steps, that I would grow in peace. So that spoke to my spirit, that spoke to me. And interestingly, the first time I ever took steps 1, 2, and 3, before I fully conceded to my innermost self that I was in fact an alcoholic, I tried them out on my emotions, because I was not emotionally sober and I had a very low emotional bottom. You know, a friend of mine, because our third tradition states the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking, that he assured me there could be a place in Alcoholics Anonymous for an alcoholic of my type, which is the white wine and cheese variety, the champagne variety, you know, that's real alcoholism too. And once I did my first step, I saw that my drinking wasn't sane and I really did belong here, just like everyone else. But my emotional bottom, you know, suicidal ideation, just all of that. And so I took it on anxiety. I was riddled with anxiety. I was eaten alive with insomnia, you know, and if I could just get a grip and have a good night's sleep. And in our story, Acceptance is the Answer, there's that very well-loved page about, you know, my serenity is proportional to my level of acceptance. But the page prior, the author of that story says, I thought if I could just control things outside of me, I would feel okay inside of myself. That's the line that was like ding, 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 ding for me. Because if I could just get the temperature right on what everyone was doing around me, then I could be okay. Then I could be okay. Which is what the book is addressing when it talks about the ego and the self-centeredness and the selfishness, right? And that's not being God-centered, because when I'm God-centered, everything is okay. And I don't need to manipulate. I don't need to martyr. I don't need to mother. I don't need to manage to be okay in this moment. So there I was, eaten alive with anxiety, yet again, in the middle of the night, panicked that I wasn't sleeping. And I thought, I'll just try these steps that they're talking about. So step 1, I said, I am powerless over this anxiety and my life is totally unmanageable by me. Totally unmanageable by me. Step 2, I will come to believe that this power can restore me. I'm lost. I am lost. Restore me to sound thinking, to sanity. I believe that there's a power out there that is greater than myself, because of myself, I am a mess. I'm a hot mess. I've dropped my basket, as we say in the South. And then I went into the step 3. You know, I am making a decision right here and now to turn all of this over to the care of my higher power. And I'm telling you what, that anxiety evaporated. It was lifted from me and I fell asleep. It may have only been for 40 minutes, but it was peaceful and I slept. And when that anxiety came back like a can of worms, eating me alive from the inside out, I just took the first 3 steps again. So I started to have some experiential proof that they worked. And when I did finally, as our book says, concede to my innermost self that I too was an alcoholic and that I had a peculiar mental twist that caused me to engage in the insanity of picking up that first drink, it was only natural that I would apply those steps to the drink. That I was powerless over alcohol and that my life became unmanageable when I drank. That I could turn the drink over to a power greater than myself and ask to be restored to sanity and turn my will and my life over to the care of that power. And I have not found it necessary to pick up a drink in 16 years. And the compulsion and the obsession has been lifted from me. And if you are new, it says in our book that we can meet calamity with serenity. Rent money, car money, food money. God doesn't necessarily pay the bills, but it's about how I feel about it and having some peace as I put one foot in front of the other, 1 minute at a time. Rely on a sponsor, rely on the literature, get to a meeting, and I can at least meet it, if not with serenity, with sobriety. And some examples for me are walking through a divorce with someone I still love very much. And it was a divorce that was peaceful, and it wasn't a nasty, contentious, yucky divorce. It was something we did with dignity and respect because it was done in recovery. Never occurred to me that I would drink over that. In fact, he had been a partner in my sobriety. He's not an alcoholic, but he's someone who always still has my 10-year medallion on his desk and calls me every year on my anniversary. When my mother died by suicide, and I'm the one who found her still alive and laboring, because of steps 8 and 9 and because of the restoration in our relationship, I loved her home. I walked her home. It was all about, I see you. I love you. I know how you've been suffering. All was forgiven long ago. And sharing with her the most precious and intimate words that 2 human beings can exchange when the veil of death has been parted and a person is crossing over. That's because of the steps of 8 and 9 in Alcoholics Anonymous. And a drink never crossed my mind during the agony that followed and the profound trauma into which I was catapulted. And when I was in the Central African rainforest and I fell in the dark and my leg shattered in 4 places and my foot was paralyzed, and I lay on the rainforest floor for hours and hours without any help, without any pain medicine. Well, I was given a codeine tablet and it was expired. And the bones were misshapen and my leg looked like a boomerang. And by the time I did get help 67 hours later, my leg was so mangled that it was days after that they were unsure whether or not my leg would have to be amputated. I had been hemorrhaging. I had been evacuated on a motorbike with 2 men holding me up in case I passed out for 5 hours in the jungle on a muddy track. And all I had was my higher power. And I would say to myself, when I get to my edge, let me soften. When I get to my edge, let me soften. And I would get to the outer edge of my outer edge, and it was more than I could bear. And I would think, I will be at a future meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I will say to the newcomer, there's nothing that a drink will make better, and we can stay sober through anything, because I was offered alcohol in the bush with a broken leg in 4 places and a paralyzed foot, and I did not drink. We have promises that accompany every step. Our book is loaded with promises. You know, the beginning of the end of isolation, it says at the end of step 8 in the 12 and 12. And it says in the step 10 promises, we will react sanely and normally, for by this time sanity will have returned. We will recoil as if from a hot flame. That was my experience when I was offered alcohol in the Congo with my broken leg, laying there just wretched in the dirt. Mama, Ashley, drink this. No, thank you. No, thank you. Alcoholics Anonymous works if I follow the directions and go through the literature and work these steps and rely on the higher power. And it works on other things too. You know, those are the big sweepstakes things. But what about, you know, your dog dying? It works on that as well. It sounds kind of trivial to follow stories like that with a dog, but my hound was my life. We were athletes together. We traveled around the world together. He worked for me. He was a service animal. We were merged beings. And I was in a place where animals would have to quarantine for 6 months. I was in Scotland, and so I hadn't brought him with me. And while he was here in Tennessee and I was there, he was attacked by a coyote. And I was crying so hard. I was so hysterical. I'd gotten this information that he was on the precipice of death. I called my sponsor and she thought I was laughing because I wasn't making any sense. I was so distraught. And the next thing I knew, she was saying, "Is your life unmanageable?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she said, "Do you believe in a power greater than yourself?" "Yes." "Can you be restored to sanity?" "Yeah." And she was walking me through the first 3 steps. And she said, "Well, what is your decision to be?" She couldn't help me. It says in our book, we are beyond human aid. And so I hung up the phone and I went running outside and I went to a tree because nature is often where I experience my higher power. And I got on my knees and I wrapped my arms around this tree and I said, "I am so powerless over this situation. I'm incomprehensible to the people around me. And I have to figure out how to get through the next 48 hours, whether or not this person in my life who's everything to me is going to live or die. And I have to get back to Tennessee and I'm going to be on an airplane during the flight where I have no information about him and he might die then." And I was flooded with peace after I took the steps on this. And I managed to have good orderly direction, which is an acronym for me, for my higher power, God, good orderly direction. And the story has a good ending because he made it and we were together for another many, many, many years. So that was I was at a newcomers meeting earlier today. And so that was really some of what I wanted to emphasize was the portability of these steps, And then I wanted to read the end of step 7 in the 12 and 12 to reinforce what I'm saying, because it says at the end of step 7 in the 12 and 12, on page 76. I'll read the whole paragraph. The 7th step is where we make, we've got kitty cat help here. Audrey, you're knocking the computer. Excuse me, just let me get her off my microphone. Hold on. We avoid retaliation and argument. There we go. The 7th step is where we make the change in our attitude, which permits us, with humility as our guide, to move out from ourselves toward others and toward God. That's a promise. The whole emphasis on step 7 is on humility. It is really saying to us that we ought to be willing to try humility in seeking the removal of our other shortcomings, as we did when we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. If that degree of humility could enable us to find the grace by which such a deadly obsession could be banished, then there must be hope of the same result respecting any other problem we could possibly have. So it's saying, if these steps will relieve my obsession to drink, then there must be hope of the same result respecting any other problem I could possibly have. And that's what I want in AA. I don't want to just come in and not drink and be bananas. I want to be happy. And my circumstances right now are not ideal. I'm still recovering from the loss of my mother, which will be a lifelong loss. Thank you so much for letting me know. And Wednesday was her birthday, and I, believe what it says on the pages on step 11 that talk about how what used to be the occasional hunch will become, we will start to live on the plane of inspiration. I get up pretty early, and the other morning I just had this whoosh, this fulminated idea that I wanted to give my mom a birthday party to celebrate her birthday. And this was at 4:30 in the morning. And by 5:00, I had a guest list and an invitation, and people were invited to bring memories and anecdotes about her. And I loved decorating my house with her in mind, and did it in a way that I hoped she would enjoy. And folks came, and some of the memories were hilarious because this was a woman who did not have much of a filter and, would know a boundary if you tossed it at her. And some of them were precious and dear. And it was sacred. It was a beautiful experience. And in AA, I've learned how to celebrate life as well as embrace understanding that devastation comes with the experience of living wholly and fully too. And my partner and I spend 2 weeks apart in December, and then I join him in Europe, and then we go to Africa together for 2 months. Well, I got a really bad virus, and I wasn't able to travel over. And then I got COVID, and I wasn't able to travel over. And now I'm not recovering well from COVID, and I wasn't able to go to Africa. And this 2 months is really precious time for us. And he relies on me significantly while we're there. Let me just put it this way. We're partners, and we're partners in a common effort. And it's a very special part of our life. It's something that we deeply and uniquely share. And it's disappointing. But I don't know if I seem to you like a disappointed, glum person. I'm happy, and I make the most of it. And I have my local AA meetings to go to. I've got my chosen family to visit with. I have a meeting like this to come to. I've got literature to read. I have sponsees to talk to, as well as all of the other things that make my life full, as well as the fact that I feel super bad and I sleep 3 times a day. So calamity with serenity. And it's a good life in Alcoholics Anonymous. And a drink never crosses my mind. It is a non-factor today. So I just want to close with this beautiful paragraph from step 12. The theme of step 12 is the joy of living, because each step in the 12 and 12 has a theme. And there's this beautiful paragraph towards the end. It's maybe has the distinction of being the longest run-on sentence in AA literature. But it just says, let me just find it. Still, and this is on page 124. Still more wonderful is the feeling that we do not have to be specially distinguished among our fellows in order to be useful and profoundly happy. Not many of us can be leaders of prominence, nor do we wish to be. Service gladly rendered, obligations squarely met, troubles well accepted or solved with God's help. The knowledge that at home or at the world outside we are partners in a common effort. The well understood fact that in God's sight all human beings are important. The proof that love freely given surely brings a full return. The certainty that we are no longer isolated and alone in self-constructed prisons. The surety that we no longer be square pegs in round holes, but can fit and belong in God's scheme of things. These are the permanent and legitimate satisfactions of right living, for which no amount of pomp and circumstance, no heap of material possessions could possibly be substitutes. True ambition is not what we thought it was. True ambition is the deep desire to live usefully and walk humbly under the grace of God. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you this evening. It's been really delightful, and I so appreciate being allowed to participate. Peace be with you.